I'm sitting at home looking at Shane MacGowan's funeral and I see Jerry Adams coming on to eulogise. And I see Nick Cave. And in between the two of them I see this young guy. I haven't a clue who he is. I didn't know him from Adam. But I'm actually talking to him here today in the Irish Rock and Roll Museum. His name is Brian Cargasson. And he's going to tell me how he actually wound up carrying Shane MacGowan's coffin in and changing arms with Johnny Depp, who took over to take him out. Brian, how did you get from wherever you came from with Kilcock?
Well, Kilcock, come a long way from Kilcock, Bruce, yeah, and you know that yourself because you're out there by yourself, you know. But before we start, I'd like to say thank you for coming, because I'm in the presence of rock royalty with you, so, you know, a lot of us wouldn't be here without you, so thank you, first of all, and thank all to the guys for being here as well, you know. But you know that my father's from Kilcock, Brush.
I know that very well.
I didn't notice till the other day, Brush says, we all know your father's from. So
we all know him. Everybody knew your father as well.
I didn't notice at all.
Yeah.
You know, so my father had a pub in Kildare, of course, Scadden's pub. It's still there, like in the bones of it to this day.
Yeah.
And Paddy Riley would have drank in my father's pub. The second best person to do Fields of Athenry, you know. But you know, like, so I would have been around the music all my life, you know.
Yeah.
The Dubliners and Lizzy would have been on the radio all day, every day.
Yeah.
So I would have grown up around music all my life, and skateboarding was a big thing for me at the start.
So you were skateboarding in Ireland?
Yeah.
What year was that?
About one of the only ones in 1998.
Okay.
So my thing is rock music, roll, skateboarding.
Yeah, okay.
So rock and roll, you know, that was my little thing, you know.
Oh man.
I was on my own in both of them, but you know, you go along anyway, you know.
Yeah.
So around 2008,
yeah,
my father sells his pub, right, and we go down to Nina,
yeah,
and that's of course Shane MacGowan land. You know what I mean? So he's the king down in that town, you know. So we ended up back in Nina, and you know, you go through college and the whole lot, and skateboarding was big for the younger years, still is, but like it was majorly big then. Went over to California, you know, chasing the dream as everybody did. You went there yourself, you know what I mean? Yeah. And came back, and when I was finished college, Brush, I met Philomena.
Yeah.
Of course, the queen of rock and roll, you know.
Right.
I met her at the statue of Brooks Ells, right? And I got down on one knee, and I went over and I gave her a rose.
Yeah.
And I just wrote one note: if you ever need anything,
yeah,
you know what I mean? I'd love to go out and cut your grass, or you know, do your shopping or whatever. And she, of course, typical Phyllis, she says, "Come on out to the house." And I said, no. She says, "You're coming." I said, okay. So we went out to the house and we became great mates. And you know her, like she'd say, "I want to meet your mother, I want to meet your father, I want to meet your girlfriend." And you know the whole,
I do very well.
You know, you're my toy boy. You bring the girlfriend out, she says, "Is this me competition?" You know, this type of stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And when I was going to America after college, she said, "Go on out and meet my friend." And she didn't tell me who he was. Now, you've met this man since, Brush, and Keith over there has met Robert Culkin.
Yeah. Robert
Culkin's a big guy. He was in the rock scene back in the 80s in the Sunset Strip. He was in a band called Rude Awakening. Yeah. And he actually opened for Megadeth, right? Big band Megadeth,
that's right? Yeah, that's right.
And Megadeth's next album was called Rude Awakening, after his band. And they didn't say nothing to Bob about it, they just took the name and left, you know. So Bob was a big cat in the music industry and other industries as well. But I became great friends with Bob. You know, and he really changed me. There's a whole personal thing underneath it all, which is not music related, so we don't need to go there, but it really helped me emotionally to meet this man, and he became like a brother to me, you know. And he's big. Like, I walked into his office and it's like this, it was wall to wall Lizzy stuff, and he just hugged me and he said, "Welcome, brother." You know, and like he met Philip when he was 16, and
that's right.
You know what I mean, and he had his big scrapbook of all the Lizzy stuff, and he said, "Philip, look at all this stuff." But then another guy came up beside him with an even bigger scrapbook, and Philip said, yeah, look at this. And Bob was good, but Bob was a big Lizzy fan. Yeah. So Bob would have come over to who would have flown Philomena over to Los Angeles in 1996 when she was first starting to come out to the Vibes and whatever, and then with Smiley Bolger, you know, God bless him, you know. And they did a gig in the Palace Theatre, and then Bob would come over for the Vibe. So it started a long tradition with Philomena and Bob being great friends, right? So when I was in LA then, I wrote Philomena a book. I wrote her a book, like I wrote her a whole, it's called A Letter to Philomena, line it delivered by Aidan McKenna, who's a friend of mine, happens to be Damien Rice's uncle.
Okay.
And I gave it to her and she said, "Are you on drugs?" She thought I was mad, you know. So I became really good friends with her anyway, you know. And when I was hanging out with her quite a lot, she knew my mother was from Tipperary, and she loved Shane MacGowan, and I used to probe her. I say, "Why are you so into Shane? Like, what was the story?" And I'm sure the Lizzy heads here know that, like, Philip had a roadie called Big Charlie, Charlie McNamara?
No, I knew him pretty well.
I'm sure you knew him very well.
I did,
You know?
Yeah.
Philomena used to say he was the closest thing to a gay lover Philip ever had, you know what I mean, was Big Charlie. They were inseparable apparently, you know. And when Philip passed away, God bless him, Philomena gave Philip's wedding ring to Big Charlie.
Yeah.
Right? And then sure didn't Big Charlie and Frank Murray with Lizzy go on to work with the Pogues?
Yeah.
This was the big crossover. See, people don't realise that Shane and Philip were friends and they used to hang out, right? So God bless him as well. Charlie passed away eventually, you know, and Shane took the ring off his hand and went and gave it to Philomena, and that was Philomena's heart forever for her, you know, for Shane. So she was always like, we have to go down to Tipperary to meet your mother and bring this statue, little mini statue to Shane. It just became a repetitive thing. Like she was like, we're going to do this, and she at the same time Johnny Depp was on the scene, and Johnny Depp was quoted in the paper as saying, turns out of Irish heritage I might be related to somebody cool like Phil Lynott. And she says, I'm going to adopt him, you know. So this was her whole thing. She was mad getting the statues to people. So, you know, God, you know, I didn't get a chance to bring it to Shane in her lifetime. You know, I used to send her letters every week. I'd send her 1 to 5 letters every week. All sorts of funny stuff, you know what I mean? And I'd show up, like the last time I ever saw her was Christmas time, the eve of Christmas Eve, whatever, 2018 or whatever. And I showed up dressed like Christmas present. I was in a giant box. This is the type of thing I would have done for every day. You know, like I do stuff for like,
I know,
I'm only starting to do it for you. You know what I mean?
You never fail to impress me, right?
I have to, you know what I mean? It's my nature. So, you know what I mean? So she passed away, God bless her, and her wake ended up being my birthday.
Yeah.
So like I was standing there on my birthday looking at her for ages, and it was quite emotional, you know, and she passed away, God bless her. And then of course that was only about 6 months before the pandemic. Yeah. Right? So once that goes on, then I go into that same church that she was buried at. You were at the funeral, I remember seeing it. I wanted to talk to you, but I was fucking streaming crying at the time, I couldn't. But I went into the church many months later. I used to go visit Graham out in White Horses all the time. I'd visit him the whole time. And I found a prayer, right, and it's called the St. Anthony Strezana, and I'm sure some of the lads are familiar with it, but it's a 13-week prayer, and you're meant to every Tuesday give 3 prayers away and tie a knot in a ribbon. It's Christian mysticism, Russ.
Well, we understand that all right.
You understand it a lot better than me, but I'm trying.
No, I understand it.
Totally, right? Yeah. So I actually did the 13-week prayer, and I prayed for a job, right? Yeah. And madly enough, I met the owner of this place, Paddy Dunning, at Philomena's grave, and I got this gig. So I started working at the Rock and Roll Museum.
Oh, it's the St. Anthony Phyllis.
This is St. Anthony, but it's her as well. You know what I mean? I'm sure she's up there with them. I'm sure she's up there with them.
So she's Phyllis Paggio at the moment.
She's still deserving, you know. So I was blown away by it. So I started working here, and a couple of months later, then there was a book launch for the Crock of Gold book launch. Yeah. Shane had been making artwork all his life. Johnny Depp and the lads, I think, commissioned it to make a project. I'd say it was to encourage him, right, to get him into the game again. To keep going, you know. Yeah. So it's actually this one right here. You know, I'll get to that in a minute, but this is actually it. You know, it's a limited edition book. There was 2,000 of them. They cost 2,000 each.
Very expensive.
Very expensive. That's the whole point. It's a book of art. That's an art piece itself. Yeah. So that whole thing, right? So Paddy, the owner, says, you go and represent us. All right. So I went in and I walked in, and it was like I saw a unicorn. I literally froze, and I just looked at him. I said, oh my God, he's like porcelain white, you know what I mean? He was sitting in the corner puffing away in a vape. And I went to the bar, and there was a load of people from Nina at the bar. And I just looked at one of them and I said, what's happening? And he knew my grandparents, like, straight away. Yeah. And I bought him a drink, and he just looked at me, nodded, and walked off. You know? Turns out he was a friend of Shane since he was 7, you know? So eventually the lads, because I've been trying to get through to Shane for years, were like, do you want to meet him? I was like, of course I do, you know? So I went over and I met him. And the first thing, if you ever look at Shane's right hand, he was wearing a bracelet, right? And remember the roadie I meant, Charlie. Yeah. Philip had made 3 bracelets, one for Philip, one for Charlie, and one for Shane. So if you ever look at Shane's right wrist, he was always wearing it. So Philip was obviously really close to Shane's heart. Okay. He was his hero, you know? Which for me, being my hero as well, and Shane being a hero of mine, to see the lineage was great. So me and him started to talk. And one thing, when Philomena was alive, Shane's mother passed. And I told Philomena, I said, he's lost his mother, you've lost your son. I said, go to the funeral. So Philomena, God bless her, about 85, 86, whatever age she was at the time, went down to Tipperary and went to the funeral. And it was actually the last time that they would have ever spoke. So even for me at that point, I thought to connect Lizzy and Pogues at any point for me was like tick. You know what I mean? I was like, great, you know. So you know what I mean. So you know, Siobhan, his sister, had come into my mother's shop in Tipperary, found out what we were doing. So I actually had gotten the statue to him 2 days before the lockdowns, and I remember I was bringing the statue over to him, and there was a card, and I seen a little insect, and I thought, that's the coronavirus. I'm going to kill McGowan. I said, I'm going to kill him. I was so scared. Everybody was terrified. So the point was, I didn't get to meet him before the lockdown.
Okay.
So here we were, and I was actually meeting him. And the first thing I said to him was like, oh, Sam, I brought you that statue. I was the one who gave you the statue. And he said, oh, Phil used to be a good mate of mine, yeah? And he said, this bracelet was Philip's, you know? And then I said, I actually was the person who sent your mother, or Philomena down to your mother's funeral.
Yeah.
And then the minute I mentioned his mother, he's like, oh. It's like Phyllis, like you wouldn't know what you're saying as a naive outer circle person when you're just meeting these people first. You know that very well. I mean, of course, the stuff people would be saying. I'm sure the stuff I'd be saying to you, you know. Forgive me, you know.
No,
but you know, it's in innocence. Now the people know that you know you don't know what you're saying. So anyway, the point was he started to become very talky with me, and I sat with him the whole night, you know, and I'd be saying, do you want a drink? And it was like double, triple gin and tonics, the classic Shane stuff that everybody said, you know. And it was a great night, and Jerry Adams is there.
Yeah.
Jerry Adams read Alcohol Abuse, Louis Walsh was there, your old manager, you know what I mean? Brian Kennedy was there. It was a good night, you know, and to see all the boys and girls, it was amazing, be around Shane. And the night actually ended up as a sing-song, and I've got a video of it. And I've got a video of it. I'm going to show you one day. It's like sang the Wild Mountain Thyme. He sang Paddy Works on the Railway. Like, I mean, that for me, I floated home. Yeah. I literally floated home. And if I'd never seen him again, it still would have been one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Lovely.
Right? And you've got to bear in mind, Bobby Dylan, our hero, you know, Bobby Dylan had played the night before in Dublin. This is when he made that famous quip. He says, I'd like to give a shout out to Shane McGowan. He's one of our favourites. I like to sing Fairy Tale of York every year. You know? Yeah. And there I was the next night with him. And I told him about that, and I was like, what do you think about that? And he's like, nah. He didn't care about it. It's just another day for Shane. Yeah. So then a couple of days later, Brush, Cronin, who were his house band and who were the band who recorded his last album with him, were playing in Whelan's. And they said, come down to the gig. And I went down to the gig, and they said, Shane's coming. And I just jumped straight in beside him, and I started talking about fairy forts, I started talking about Thin Lizzy, I started talking about Los Angeles, everything, and he was opening up to me like nothing else. And again, this was the crack for me, and I was buying him a drink all night, and I made the rookie mistake of trying to keep up with him, right? So I remember vividly at one point walking to the bathroom knowing I was going to throw up. Right, and I opened the door and I just projectile vomited, and some poor guy was like, ah. I said, sorry mate, you know. And I just went straight back down and sat beside him and kept drinking with him, you know. Yeah. Didn't think nothing of it. And I remember he turned to me at one point and he says, do you want me to sing for you? And I was like, yeah. And I was like closer than we are, like I was on his shoulder, and he just started singing Paddy Works on the Railway. And I started singing. And I started singing with him, and I couldn't believe it, you know. And I just remember thinking to myself, God, imagine if somebody recorded that, you know. So the night went on, and we hit the crack, and then the next day somebody texted me a video of that exact thing. And it turns out that was actually, I think, the last time he was ever in a bar. I think it was the last time he ever sang in a pub. I think it was the last time he ever had a drink in a pub. So it was kind of like a shocker for me. Yeah. On a side note, did you ever get to see the Pogues? I'm sure you.
A long time ago.
Long time ago?
No,
were they up your alley?
I liked them, you know, like.
Yeah. Raucous, right? So going on then, like he got encephalitis. I don't know if you remember that. He got the brain swelling.
I remember that.
Right, and he went into hospital for 6 weeks, and I thought, oh my God, like I hope he survives, you know, because I just got to meet the guy. I thought, like, I want this to go on. And then cued the last vibe for Philo. Right, and here it was in this venue right here. Bob Colkin, Philomena's mate from Los Angeles, flies in. His son, who's Philomena's godchild, Philip Paris Colkin.
That's right.
We made a documentary we were making a documentary on the last fight for Philo. So we interviewed Fran Quigley. Of course, everybody did 5-minute interviews. Fran Quigley came and did talk for an hour and a half. The lad's like, you shut up, will you? But he was the best. I mean, Fran Quigley gave us the best interview, and it was the bones of the documentary, because he knew him. I wish I'd caught you that day and would have been even better.
You know, the real days.
Yeah, it was funny because I actually showed Bruce the documentary, and he was like, "Yeah, what's new?" You know what I mean? He's like, "If you only knew the truth."
Well,
I mean, like, as in from your perspective.
Well, you know, like the most important thing is, like, from your perspective.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally. You know. So we made the documentary anyway, and I texted Victoria, Shane's wife. And I said, does Shane want to come to the gig, or does he want to be in it? Because he was out of hospital at this stage. And she said, he doesn't want to come to the gig, he's not going to be in it.
Yeah.
And then an hour later, out of nowhere, she sends me a video. And it's Shane at home with a glass of wine. And he says, hi, I'd like to talk about Phil. Yeah. He says, I was a great friend of Philip. He was a great friend of mine. So on this day, like, let's be happy, because he'd want us to be, yeah? Here's to Phil. And he cheers us, like, and my head, like the cartoons, went poof.
Yeah.
Because now Shane was going to be in the documentary, so I was blown away anyway, you know. And turns out I had a way of helping him, you know, I mean, with his condition.
Yeah.
Right. So I texted Victoria and I said, like, I can actually help him with his encephalitis if you want me to. So she said, come on out to the house. So I mean, this was just like a dream for me. So I went out to the house. Before I went to Outbrush, I came into this gift shop, right? And just as a side point, the place I bought that mini statue was this very gift shop as well, but just to try it on, it was kind of mad. But I got a load of Lizzy stuff. I ransacked the place. I got a load of Lizzy stuff, and I went out to see him, right? And I had also brought a pendant, a St. Anthony's pendant. Do you remember I said I got the St. Anthony shades on? I played a funeral for a woman during the pandemic, and just before I played it, I got attacked. So I had a big black eye. So I was in the church with big black sunglasses, you know, singing Danny Boy. But as a payment, your man paid me. But he gave me a St. Anthony's pendant with cloth that had touched St. Anthony's tongue. Yeah. So in the St. Anthony's Trezane, it says, "May your silver belt secure the favour I have asked." So that's why I prayed originally, because I said, God, here's the prayer I found in Philomena's church, and here's this silver belt. I was like, obviously I meant to do this, you know. So the point was, I thought it was like, you know, Christ being born in the manger, the 3 wise men coming with all their gifts. I was going to Shane, I was like, here's everything I could possibly muster to give to you, you know. So I gave him all the Lizzy gear, and I gave him all the other stuff that I brought for his condition, and he was thrilled. And at the very end, I just said to him, I said, and I brought this pendant. I said, do you want it? And Vic is very spiritual as well, and we all just kind of stood. It was like the Lord of the Rings, where the ring gets presented, you know. We were all kind of like, wow, that's powerful. So he took it off me, brush, and he put it on the Phil statue, and it landed on Philip's heart. And I just went, oh my God. I said, I'm doing a prayer for you, Shane. I said, what do you want me to pray for? And he actually said he wanted me to pray for him to walk, right? And I should have brought him to you. I mean, you probably would have been able to do it, you know.
Well, this is your story.
I'm just saying, like, tying it all in, looking back. Yeah. But the point was that he hadn't walked in 7 years. But I'm a man of faith, so I was like, I'm going to do this, you know. Okay. So it did, you know. 2 days later, they realised that was maybe a bit much to ask for. So they said, just pray for his health, right? So that started the prayer. That was the 31st of January. So then I'd start to go out to him more frequently. You know, they'd call me every day. I'd go out every other day. I'd start to visit him. I'd have to crack with him, you know. And being from Tipperary and being a musician and being into the same stuff, we got on very well. And a couple of weeks into it, he hands me this book, which is the Crock of Gold book.
I know this one. This is the expensive one.
This is the art book, and he gave it to me, right? And I was blown away. And I started to flick through it, and I got to this page right here, and I'll send you a picture of this, Brendan, afterwards. But it's a hurley, as you can see, right? The Irish game hurling. It's a hurley, and on it is a signature of John Heffernan. And Brush, my uncle won in All Ireland with Tipperary. And his name is John Heffernan. So I said, Shane, that's my uncle. And he said, no, he says, there's loads of people with that name in Tipperary. I said, my uncle won in All Ireland with Tipperary. That's my uncle. And we've since confirmed it. And to fast forward and look ahead, after Shane passed, there was a Shane McGowan exhibition in the Bob Dylan Centre. And that hurley was presented into the Bob Dylan Centre. So, I mean, there was all these weird connections is what I'm trying to get at with Shane. Stuff, he knew my grandparents. I would have never known this stuff if I hadn't met him. So we talk all the time, like, about Lizzy and stuff like this, and we'd have the crack, and you know, and I'd go out to him the whole time. And he'd just watch movies. That's all he's into, watching movies and having the crack. And you know, the prayer started to happen, and I started telling him about some medical procedures he could take, right? One of them was stem cell therapy, right, which you could inject into his knees and get regrowth in his knees, right? And then another was testosterone replacement therapy. Am I thinking that would kick him up, give him a bit of juice to get the stem cells working? You know what I mean? He was like, I was thinking Frankenstein. I was like, get him going. You know what I mean? I was like thinking of all this, and he was really intrigued, and he was really impressed that I was just trying to help him. I didn't want anything from him. I'd buy him things. I'd always be coming up with I'd buy Live and Dangerous, and we'd listen to Robert Johnson records and the Beach Boys, and we'd rock out, and I'd always come with gifts, you know. And as the prayer went on, it got closer to the end, and on the very last Tuesday of the 13 weeks of prayer, they called him in for a stem cell therapy consultation, and they gave him a cortisol injection, and he was bolshy is the word they used. He was really back, right? Okay. The following Tuesday, they called him in for the testosterone replacement therapy. So even the fact that it was on the Tuesdays for me was like, you couldn't write that stuff. Like, I couldn't make that stuff up, you know. And the point was that, like, I was keeping track of some of the funny stuff he'd say or some of the nice things that happened. So the actual piece of paper that's to Brush's right there is the consequence of this, right? So funnily enough, I didn't tell you this the last day when we were kind of talking about this. Victoria was doing an angel channeling session on the Hill of Tara.
Okay.
Right? And the Hill of Tara is obviously famously where if the King of Ireland touches this rock, it starts to roar. So I would touch the rock, it didn't roar, you know, but we did the angel channeling session and started to pump down rain, and there was thunder and lightning, and Vic was saying, pump out your intention like a beam of light out of your head, right? We finished this session, take a picture with Vic. I didn't even show you this, look at this. I mean, you can't fake this stuff. Isn't that weird?
This is it.
Isn't that weird, right? You know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying. There's stuff like that happening. And then, God bless Shane, I went to see Shane on St. Anthony's feast day, of all days, right? Because I was keeping track of his updates of the health things that I'd gotten him for, right? And God bless him, he was on the bed and he wasn't looking too well, you know? And to be honest, Brush, he looked like the High King of Ireland. He looked like Brian Boru with his hand, with a big sword coming down. And I walked in the room and I knew something was up, you know. So I played it cool, and I said, Shane, I'm going to go to the church for St. Anthony's. I'm going to get you some lilies. I'm going to get them blessed for you. I'm going to come back and give them to you. And it was my birthday then on the 16th. That was 12th of June. So Christy Dignam passed. God bless Christy. And then he went into hospital. And I could feel him on the teetering on the edge. Maybe I'm away with the fairies, I probably am, but I could honestly feel he was really far out. And I thought, oh God, I hope he doesn't, you know, go. And I came back to Dublin, and he was in the hospital up in Bald's Bridge there, that hospital, Vincent's, is it Vincent? And that started me going into him every day. Yeah. I'm talking morning, noon, and night, like, you know what I mean? To the point where even in the prayer, you'll see, like I was saying, I hope he's not sick of me. But I'd walk in and he'd say, Christ, I needed the company. So that had put me square then. I'd be like, thank God, you know what I mean? I'm not wrecking his head. He actually wants me here, you know? And like, you know, on a side note, I'd forgotten he gave me that guitar and everything, you know what I mean, as well. So like, that was a big honour for him to do as well. But so we obviously got very close in the hospital, like, and like to the point where I was with him one day, and I was sitting, just me and him like this, and I looked at the phone and it said, Sinead O'Connor, dead at 56. And it was just me and him. And Shane, Sinead's son, tragically lost his life or took his life, was named after McGowan, right? And I learned about that through Imelda May, had put up a poem of young Shane Lunny that he had written before he passed, and I wrote a melody to it. So I always felt a strange connection to that young man and to Sinead for that reason. So to be in the room when Sinead had passed was really like a wild one to me. You know what I mean? I was like, this is mad. So again, you'd just be there for these rock history moments with a rock legend, you know? So, you know, then of course Sinead's funeral comes around and the big B, Bono, walks into the room, and you know what I mean? And Imelda May, this is normal for you, but for me this was like, oh my God, you're just in such a whirlwind of, as I said, rock history, you know what I mean? And they were very close. And so I was quite close to Shane, and around September he got ill, like he was always ill, he was in the hospital, but like he got quite ill, he had a dip, and he come out, and then that's when I was going over to LA to write the script for that documentary that we filmed the year before to show at the next event. And I remember telling him, I remember hugging him, saying like, just get strong. I was like, the next time I see you, you're going to be at home. I'd always be encouraging him, and he was always really kind to me because he saw that I was so encouraging to him. And I got back and he was still there, and we'd hang out. And towards the end, like, it started to get quite spiritual. Like, I could see he was reconciling with things inside himself, and he was very Christ-like. He was emanating this like beautiful energy. And I told you this the last day, but I walked into him one time, and I said, how you doing? And he says, I was just with Jesus. And I said, how is he? You know what I mean? I just let it roll, you know?
Yeah.
And he was like, all right, you know? And I sat down beside him, and I started to feel this pulse of energy coming off him. And I was like, what's that? And Shane just pipes him, and he goes, is he with you yet? And I said, it's who? And he goes, Jesus. And I was like, oh my God. And I said, what was he like, Shane? And Shane was quite a contrarian, like, you know, when he feels you're on his tail, he pushes you off, and he goes, I'm not a follower of Christ, yeah? Like, this was the classic thing with Shane. Once you get close to him, boom. So, you know what I mean? I had to crack with him, and like, I was very close with him, and I always thought he was going to make it. I was never thinking he was, because he came out so many times like this, that I was like, this isn't it for him. But as we got closer, you know what I mean, it became a thing of like, people were saying to me, don't be naive, Brian. You know what I mean? Because they'd see that I was rooting for him, and they didn't want me to be crushed if something happened to him. So they were telling me all this, and so I made sure to make every moment count. You know what I mean? And God bless him, even to the last day, he was very good to me, and I was very good to him. And the last thing we ever said to each other was, I love you.
Well, okay.
And I'm so glad about that, right? Because men don't say that stuff to each other that much. And he said it to me back. And the following day then I come in, and this was the only time, Brush, I said, this isn't good. I said, this is wrong. So, you know what I mean, I tried to focus on other things or whatever, but it started to become apparent that this was bad. And I remember walking out, and there was a lady with Down syndrome outside the door, and she was like the cop. She was vetting everybody who walked past, you know. She was giving me a bit of humour. And a woman came over, and she was asking us what were we doing. She says, is that Shane McGowan? And I said, yeah, it is, yeah. I said, I wasn't even meant to be here today. I wasn't meant to be in there that day. I just was called in. And she just looked at me and she said, I think you were meant to be here. And I was like, all right. And then, of course, it came to the thing of call in Victoria. Calling Victoria. And I remember, I didn't tell you this last day, but I was on my knees holding his hand, praying to him. I was saying the Our Father and the Hail Mary, and I remember I said, and at the hour of our death, amen. And I heard Victoria's heels clicking in. It was fucking unbelievable. And she walked in, and we just sat there and we prayed with them the whole time, you know. What else can you do? You know, and you know, all that stuff is very personal, so I won't get into obviously the details of that, you know what I mean? This is it. But like, I mean, at the end of the day, like I wrote the prayer as it happened, you know what I mean? So it's all there anyway. But cue to the funeral, right? Tipperary, right?
All right.
You know, Shane had reconciled me a family member and his sister. They used to corner me in the room and say, we're going to call your family member. We're going to call your family member. I'd be scared to death, you know what I mean? You know, it's so pulling into Nina, I actually reconciled with that family member. So it was already a really meaningful thing for me, right? And at the wake was, so touching, you know? Because all these songs, like, you know, the Limerick Rake,
yeah,
may you gather around and offer a prayer to the Lord for our soul or our Father, like, that's what these songs meant so much to me before this. So I just think that this is too much. And when I was leaving the wake, Brush, Siobhan comes to me and says, okay, so the pallbearers arrive at 2 o'clock tomorrow. I said, what? I said, my pallbearer? She said, did nobody tell you? I said, oh my God. So I went anyway, and you know, we got fluted drunk, as you'd imagine, you know, just to numb the pain, I suppose, you know. But the following morning I woke up with an aching head, and I got a text from the manager of the whole thing, and he says, and this is the Bible verse you'll be reading as well. So, and this is true to God. I looked at the Bible verse, you know it, I can't remember the verse, but basically the Bible verse was all about reconciling with strong nations. So what had happened for me through Shane was in the Bible verse. So I was kind of protecting the bubble of whatever was happening outside all this didn't matter to me, because I knew what it meant to me. Yeah. You know? So this is the gas one. I got to the church, and you got to imagine, I was in this church when I was a kid, and I used to look up at the church and say, hey, why is it so big? what could this ever be used for? And here we were, and it was everybody ever in the place, you know, packed to the gills, right? And I sit down and I open the pamphlet, and it says, like you said, Jerry Adams, Brian Coscaden, Nick Cave. And I just said,
That's why we're talking to you today, Brian.
I know.
In fact, that's why I'm not talking today.
I know. What can you say? You know what I mean? What could you say, you know? So luckily I didn't have time to get nervous because it was all happening so quick. So Jerry got up. Did you happen to hear Jerry's speech?
I did, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It was very moving, and Jerry was nearly brought to tears. And Jerry's been through a lot in his life. So you can imagine how much that was pulling on my heartstrings. But again, I just stuck tunnel vision, horse blinders on. I got up and I said the prayer, and I found myself pointing at the audience.
I noticed that.
I don't know why I was doing it. It was because the Israel and all that was going on, the Palestine, and I was kind of like, we've got to settle all these disputes, lads. Like, this is, I was probably pointing at myself as well, you know what I mean? Like, I've got to settle these disputes. So I remember when it was finished, I just remember collapsing into the chair and thinking, good, it's done now, I can cry, you know? And like, I actually skipped a part. One of the maddest things was that when I was the pallbearer, Philly Ryan runs the funeral service, looked at me and said, Brian, you carry him with Anthony. And I'd done the St. Anthony Trisana, and here I was carrying Shane with Anthony up the aisle. So it was totally profound. So again, it was so unreal that you didn't know what was going on, you know what I mean? It was just happening. And the service was quite moving, you know, and when the dancing happened, when the ladies jumped up dancing, I burst into tears. It was so beautiful. Shane would have loved that. Like, that was so him. And then we had to carry him out. And I stood up, and then Johnny Depp stands up. And it was like the Wild West, you know, like, you know what I mean? I said, you do it, Johnny, you know what I mean? Because they were mates and whatever. So I carried him in, and Johnny carried him out. And I remember that, you know, the next day, it was the cremation in Shannon, right? And I was standing off to the side on my own, and Vic was standing beside the casket with Johnny. And I was like looking away, and she says, Brian, get over here. And I walk over and I hug Johnny. I said, what's up, brother? How are you doing? And we start talking like normal, because it was all so mad. It may as well have been normal. And then I started to walk in behind the casket with Johnny, you know? And then Vic came in, and then they sat in front of me. I sat to the back. And Seamus Ong, a friend of mine, and he will be a friend of yours, was playing the pipes with Liam O'Malley. And it was very emotional, right? And I remember at one point, the curtain was coming down, and there was somebody on the right of me, somebody left me. The person on my left took my right hand, the person on my right took my left hand, and it was like a human chain. And I just burst into tears, and I was sobbing uncontrollably. Like, I never experienced anything like it. And it went down, and then it was just over, you know. And we went back to Dromineer for the afters. And I remember I had brought the guitar with me, right? And you can see there's a bit of sellotape here. I had a bit of cardboard over it because I didn't want to ruin the signature. Okay. So I went down to the Dromineer Lake. The boys gave me a glass of rum, and it started pouring rain, and I was by the boat club, the Broad Majestic Shannon, you know. It was all there for me, you know. And I started singing into the night, into this storm. And as I sang louder, it got wilder, and it all felt so real. And then as I sang quieter, it got quieter, and then it just stopped, right? And I kicked the bottle of rum over, the jar of rum over. And the perfect silhouette of the picture of him with the martini glass that was on his casket was outlined on the ground. I know that's one of the madder things I'm going to say today, but I tell you, it was there. Okay. And I ran home to get my phone to take a picture of it. I came back, the rain had just taken it. So I'll forever be a kook. They'll think I'm a kook for saying it. Yeah, Brian, you know. But I finished singing, and I thought, great, you know what I mean? I got it out of me. And then I didn't think anybody was there. All the boats in the harbour started ringing the bells, going, go on, you good thing, go on, you good thing. It was a magical evening, you know, it finished. And I got home, and a very spiritual friend of mine texted me from Los Angeles, City of Angels, and she did a lot for me spirituality-wise, you know, when I was over in LA in 2015. And I didn't tell you this last day, but she texted me, and she said, open the Bible, and Shane will be with you. And I opened the Bible, and Shane was buried on the feast day of the Immaculate Conception. And I opened the Bible on the very start of the story, the Immaculate Conception. And I just felt this glow. I felt him so strongly. And I was like, wow. And that was that, you know what I mean? That was that, you know? That would have been obviously mid-December, right? And then, of course, I was asked to help carry on the tradition of the Vibe for the Philip gigs on the 4th of January. So that was the next thing coming up. So all the boys flew in from Los Angeles as well. We were going to document this documentary we'd made. Shane was going to be in it. I was really emotional, but I was looking forward to doing it. The lads asked me to go up and sing, and Philomena sent me over to Los Angeles to play music with Bob, and I never played music with him really. And that day, the Remembering Philip line of gigs, I got up and I sang the song Philomena, both nights, on a bill with Downey and Darren Wharton, and I toasted to Shane, and I said, "This is for you, buddy." I said, "This is what it's all about." You know what I mean? So it was like a massive finale for myself. I was so raw with the emotion that like again I was just kind of going through the emotions, kind of autopilot. And to bring it all full circle now is that Fran Quigley, Fran the man, says, "I'm going to let you meet Brush," and he brings me out to you. And to be honest, I could tell you another hour's worth of stuff that's happened the last year. Keith will tell you, the last year has been very incredible for me, and much to do with you as well. So again, thank you so much.
Well, Brian, the reason we're here today was, and you're almost mesmerising.
Almost.
There's no point in me coming in, stopping you. You're in full flight. There's no point in trying to be funny.
Yeah.
There's no point in anything.
Yeah.
It's a fabulous story. That's the most important.
Thank you.
Everything you've done was just very. I think if Jim Sheridan is watching this, you could be.
Yeah.
They could be filming you next week.
I'd be talking to Jim. Yeah.
Well, in the meantime, Brendan Finglas will make sure that you're doing a bit of work for All Things Irish and Rock and Roll.
Yeah.
But there was no point in coming in and asking you this, that, and the other. You knew where you were.
Yeah.
You knew who you were with.
Right.
You knew why you were there.
And any time I tried to bring you in, you said it's about me, so I just kept going.
Well,
but you know,
we're back to the same thing again.
Yeah.
The quest for knowledge and spiritual enlightenment.
Yeah.
This is a new All Things Irish and Rock and Roll. It's going to be All Things Irish and Rock and Roll, but it's really about this quest for knowledge and spiritual enlightenment.
And you're a plumber's now.
No, so but he could be like fly fishing and Zen and the art of fly fishing.
Yeah.
But you've started the whole thing. It's all about it. You know, there's different types of spirituality. There's different, there are coincidences that can't be explained.
This is right.
There are things that happen that no one will ever be able to explain.
That's right.
And you went from skateboarding, to be up in there with, most of the rock royalty in Ireland, and you were a great help to Shane MacGowan for a part of his life that was kind of coming toward the end of the gig.
Yeah, sure.
And, I think it's nice that people will know about this. Like, people will watch this and listen to it and be very impressed with your ability to explain exactly where you were, what you were doing, who you were doing it with, and why you were doing it, and why you didn't know what you were doing half the time. But there was something moving you nicely.
Yeah,
the spirit's moving.
This is it.
So I hope the spirit moves Brendan Finglas to turn you into a bit of a...
Well, thank you very much, Bruce. And that's the prayer right there as well, so it's down on paper.
But that's a different programme. So I think you could do those on your own, basically, and explain. The last thing you want is to be having a conversation with me. That's the least. That's the least amount of talking I've done in any conversation.
I try to make it easy on you,
Well, there's sometimes there's no point in, it's gone.
Let it happen.
The show has its own flow.
Yeah.
It's your own way of doing it. You knew where you were. You knew what you were doing.
Yeah.
So everything you've done was great there. So I'm not just saying thank you. What I'm saying is that the fans of All Things Irish Rock and Roll will be seeing you on a more regular basis, because we think you should be going out talking to people.
That's right.
And seeing it from different perspective. Your own perspective.
True.
So what we're saying is thanks for the time being, Brian.
Thank you.
But you will be back again.
That's right.
And you'll pick it up take it from wherever you were.
That's right.
All that sort of thing.
That's right. And thank you very much, Brush.
So it's nothing to it.
You're the man.
So again, congratulations, boy.
Thank you very much.
You're wonderful.
And rest in peace, Shane.
And on behalf of All Things Irish and Rock and Roll and the quest for knowledge and spiritual enlightenment, which is never ending, we'll be talking to you again very shortly.
The grasshopper agrees.
Hasta la vista, baby. I will be back.
Thank you very much, Brush.